In a dramatic courtroom spectacle that had the public riveted, Tiffany Henyard, the controversial mayor of Dalton, faced the most humiliating moment of her career. The packed courtroom, filled with reporters, political analysts, and citizens, had been buzzing in anticipation for weeks. Would this be the day Henyard would be held accountable for her alleged corruption, her misuse of power, and her extravagant lifestyle funded by taxpayer money? The tension in the room was palpable. But what unfolded was far more dramatic than anyone could have predicted. As the judge read the verdict, Henyard's reaction was swift, shocking, and filled with fury. Barely giving the judge a chance to finish, she stormed out of the courtroom, her heels pounding against the floor in a defiant rage. This wasn't just any outburst. It was the moment her political career seemed to unravel. Her angry departure sent gasps echoing through the courtroom, while whispers spread like wildfire, and reporters scrambled to capture every detail. What had pushed Henyard to this breaking point? What had made the once confident and charismatic leader of Dalton lose all control in such a public and dramatic way? The backdrop to Henyard's meltdown had been months of mounting scandals. Accusations of corruption, abuse of power, and even embezzlement had followed her for years. But they had intensified recently as investigators dug deeper into her financial records and the dealings of her administration. Allegations had swirled around her ever-increasing expenditure of public funds on luxury flights, lavish hotel stays, and shopping sprees, while Dalton's residents were suffering from cuts to essential services and rising taxes. Henyard's supporters, once staunch and loyal, began to turn against her as the cracks in her carefully crafted public persona began to show. As Henyard entered the courtroom that fateful day, it was clear she wasn't the same confident figure that had once dominated the political scene. Gone were her designer outfits, her flashy accessories, and her trademark cocky attitude. Instead, she appeared subdued, almost fragile, as the prosecutor began laying out the case against her. One by one, the accusations against her were read aloud, the evidence mounting with every word. The prosecutor detailed Henyard's lavish spending, the $43,000 she had spent on Amazon, the first-class flights, and the luxury hotels that had been paid for with public funds. At first, Henyard remained still, perhaps hoping the accusations would just blow over. But as the evidence piled up, it was clear that things were much worse than she had imagined. Screens in the courtroom flashed with irrefutable proof. Emails, bank transfers, and private agreements all connected Henyard to a series of shady financial transactions. The room was filled with disbelief as people began to realize just how deep her corruption ran. Even her most loyal supporters were visibly unnerved, exchanging shocked looks as the prosecutor continued to lay bare the details of her misuse of power. Henyard's once strong demeanor started to crack, and her eyes flickered to the exit, clearly considering fleeing the courtroom. The defense, of course, fought back. Henyard's lawyers claimed that the evidence had been misinterpreted, that this was all part of a smear campaign against a strong woman in power. But their arguments fell flat. The people of Dalton, represented by the jury, knew the truth. The once fearless leader who had spent years crafting an untouchable image was now standing on the edge of a very public fall from grace. Then came the final blow. A key witness, a former member of Henyard's inner circle, took the stand. This was someone who had once been a trusted ally but had now turned against her, revealing the full extent of the toxic, corrupt culture that had permeated Henyard's administration. The courtroom was on edge as the witness described stories of manipulation, threats, and intimidation against anyone who dared to question Henyard's actions. It wasn't just a scandal. It was the collapse of a regime built on lies and fear. Henyard's face froze, a combination of shock and fury written across it. She had always believed she could talk her way out of anything, that no one could break the narrative she had built. But now, surrounded by evidence and witnesses, she realized that this time was different. The walls were closing in. As the judge called for a break before delivering the final verdict, Henyard stood, her hands gripping the edge of the table as if she might tear it apart. Her lawyers scrambled to calm her, but it was clear that Henyard was losing control. She had always prided herself on being a fighter, on dominating every situation. But now it was clear that the situation was bigger than her. When the break ended and the judge prepared to read his decision, Henyard's restraint finally snapped. She leaped to her feet, shouting, "This is a setup. This is all lies. You just can't handle a powerful black woman." Her outburst echoed through the courtroom, taking everyone by surprise. The prosecutor remained calm, folding his arms and watching her with a mixture of disdain and indifference as she imploded. The courtroom erupted in chaos, reporters scrambling to capture the moment, security rushing to intervene, urging Henyard to calm down. But Henyard wasn't finished. "You all will regret this," she yelled, her voice shaking with fury. "You think I'm going down, but I'm not going anywhere." She stormed toward the exit, her fury palpable. But as she reached the door, everything changed. A group of federal agents, who had been silently observing from the back of the room, suddenly stepped forward. The room fell silent. Henyard froze, her confident demeanor cracking for the first time in years. The lead agent raised a document in front of her, stating, "We need you to accompany us." The silence in the room was deafening. Even Henyard's most devoted supporters, who had once rallied behind her, were now struck silent. The woman who had once commanded every room, who had used strength as her weapon, was now cornered, vulnerable. The lead agent continued, "This is not an arrest yet," but the emphasis on the word "yet" wasn't lost on anyone. Henyard's mind raced. She had known that federal investigations were underway, but she had been assured that she was safe, that no charges would come her way. But now, in the most public way possible, she was facing the very real consequences of her actions. "This is harassment, political persecution," she snapped, her voice rising with indignation. Her lawyers rushed to intervene, trying to pull her away from the agents, urging her to leave. But Henyard wasn't going to go quietly. She glared at the lead agent, refusing to show weakness. "This is political persecution," she repeated, louder this time, trying to maintain some semblance of control. The agents, unfazed, remained where they were. "We need you to accompany us for additional questioning, Miss Henyard," the lead agent said. The courtroom was now in a frenzy. Reporters captured the moment in real time, broadcasting Henyard's meltdown to millions of viewers. As the agents escorted her from the courtroom, the atmosphere shifted from disbelief to outright chaos. People shouted questions at her. "Will you step down?" "Is it true the FBI is investigating you?" But Henyard didn't answer. Her face burned with humiliation, but she refused to let it show. As the doors to the courthouse opened and Henyard was led down the hallway, flanked by federal agents, the reality of her situation set in. The powerful, untouchable leader she once was seemed like a distant memory. Her career was in freefall, and she was now facing the consequences of her actions. Reporters narrated the scene like it was a thriller, each word amplifying her fall from grace. Outside, the scene was even worse. A crowd had gathered, shouting questions and making accusations. The media frenzy was relentless. As Henyard was led toward a federal vehicle, her face was a mixture of frustration, anger, and, for the first time in a long time, fear. Was this the end of her career? Was this the beginning of the end for Dalton's most controversial mayor? The answers were unclear, but one thing was certain. The spectacle of Henyard's downfall had only just begun. Tiffany Henyard, the once dominant political figure in Dalton, was no stranger to controversy, but the events of the day in court would mark a dramatic and humiliating turning point in her career. As the cameras clicked and reporters scribbled in a packed courtroom, Henyard found herself facing a set of allegations that had the potential to bring down even the most powerful of figures. What was once a show of confidence and unshakable leadership had suddenly morphed into a spectacle that was both tragic and revealing. The courtroom was electric with tension as Tiffany Henyard, wearing a somber expression rather than the usual designer suit and bold attitude, sat rigidly before the judge. The prosecutor presented overwhelming evidence: $43,000 spent on Amazon, first-class flights, lavish hotel stays, all while the people of Dalton endured cuts to essential services, tax hikes, and crumbling infrastructure. The room, filled with reporters, citizens, and loyal supporters, began to murmur as the evidence mounted. Henyard, usually so quick to turn the tables in any political battle, seemed visibly rattled. But it was the following revelations that really cracked her facade. Fresh documents revealed a string of transactions connecting Henyard to shady dealings. Taxpayer funds, once thought to be used for the public good, were being funneled into private accounts. Each new piece of evidence seemed to shake the foundation of her political empire. Even her legal team, known for their agility, struggled to refute the mounting proof against her. The allegations weren't just political attacks. They were the type of corruption that could ruin anyone's career. Tiffany Henyard, who had built her image as a fearless and untouchable leader, now appeared cornered. She glanced toward the door, and the expression on her face betrayed the cold, calculated politician she had once been. The air in the room thickened with anticipation. It was clear to everyone that her grip on power was slipping fast. But Henyard, always one for drama, wasn't going to go down quietly. The final blow came when a key witness, someone from Henyard's inner circle, took the stand and laid bare the toxic culture behind the scenes. There were tales of manipulation, intimidation, and even threats against those who dared to speak out. The courtroom was silent as Henyard's carefully constructed narrative began to crumble. She had always believed she could talk her way out of any situation, but today the evidence was too strong to ignore. Then, as if the entire city was holding its breath, Henyard's eruption came. As the judge read out the decision, Henyard stood up, eyes blazing, and shouted that the entire trial was a setup. "You just can't handle a powerful black woman." Her words reverberated through the room, setting off a chain reaction. Reporters scrambled, cameras flashed, and security rushed to intervene as Henyard stormed toward the door. It was then that the true gravity of the situation hit her. Federal agents, who had been quietly observing from the back of the room, stepped forward. Henyard froze as the lead agent approached her, documents in hand. "We need you to accompany us," he said. Henyard, with her usual bravado, tried to brush them off. "This is political persecution," she snapped, but it was clear from her shaking hands that she understood just how serious things had become. The sight of Henyard, once the untouchable mayor, now backed into a corner, was nothing short of dramatic. She had dominated every room she entered, always able to manipulate any situation. But today, she was powerless. "I won't go down without a fight," she muttered, though it was evident that the walls were closing in. The courtroom became chaotic as news spread like wildfire. Social media exploded with hashtags like #HenyardExposed and #JusticeForDalton. And the city's residents couldn't stop talking. The person they once revered now seemed like an embodiment of everything they had been fighting against: corruption, greed, and betrayal. Henyard's downfall, however, had only just begun. Leaked documents and audio recordings emerged, with one particular recording capturing her discussing ways to discredit her political opponents. The voices were unmistakable, and social media took off, sharing memes and critical posts. Her supporters, once unwavering, began to distance themselves. Even her closest allies were now calling for answers. The pressure mounted on Henyard's team, who scrambled to contain the damage. Public statements appeared, claiming that the recordings had been manipulated, but no one believed them anymore. Meanwhile, the investigation continued to dig deeper. Federal agents uncovered evidence of financial mismanagement and even secret offshore accounts tied to Henyard. Documents were found connecting her to shell companies and government contracts that had been marked as suspicious. One bombshell document, a bank statement showing a sizable deposit from a shell company, was enough to make Henyard's world implode. As federal agents continued to press her during the interrogation, Henyard's once unshakable confidence began to fade. The lead investigator calmly presented the damning evidence, flipping open a file to reveal a sworn statement from a former aide. Tiffany's breathing quickened. She had hoped to avoid this moment, but there was no escape now. The weight of the documents seemed to crush her confidence. She had always believed she could manipulate any narrative, but this time she was cornered. "I don't know what you're talking about," Tiffany muttered, trying to maintain her composure, but her voice faltered. The investigator slid another document in front of her, a signed deal flagged as suspicious. For the first time in the interrogation, Tiffany Henyard was silent. She had no answers. The scandal surrounding her quickly escalated. Political analysts weighed in, drawing comparisons between Henyard's fall and the most infamous political scandals in history. The city council, which had once been aligned with her, now called an emergency session. Public sentiment shifted rapidly, and what was once a base of unwavering support now seemed like a distant memory. In an effort to control the narrative, Tiffany released a video message, defiant as ever, but it was clear the public was no longer listening. Social media erupted with criticism, and former allies were now calling for her resignation. As she sat in a holding cell, Tiffany's empire crumbled. The final blow came when federal agents executed a search warrant at her home. The image of her being arrested, handcuffed and bewildered, sent shockwaves through Dalton. News outlets covered the scene extensively, and legal experts discussed the severity of the charges. Fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit bribery were just the beginning. If convicted, Tiffany could face over 20 years in prison. But even in the face of everything, Tiffany wasn't ready to give up. From behind bars, she sent a final message to her lawyers, insisting, "The truth will be revealed." But it seemed like her time had passed. Once a powerful figure, she was now a symbol of corruption and betrayal. Her fall from grace was complete, and the public watched, waiting for the final consequences to unfold. The saga of Tiffany Henyard had ended, not with a bang, but with a whisper, the collapse of a political empire built on lies and manipulation. As the city of Dalton waited for the dust to settle, many couldn't help but wonder, what else did she know? Was there more to the story, or was this the final chapter of her career? Only time would tell if she would ever be able to mount a comeback or if this would be the end of her political career. Tiffany Henyard's downfall would serve as a cautionary tale for future politicians. No one, no matter how powerful, is immune from the truth.